The visuals inside a video game started off quite rudimentary. A couple of pixels made your imagination do the heavy lifting, and the home TV's resolution being quite low, and the cost of digital logic also being quite high. But this didn't stop game developers from prospering at the arcade. Many iconic franchises started here, and even more died here. Like seriously, when have you ever seen Q*bert outside the arcade? Never? Good, because he can rot inside there for all I care. But among all the pixels, an innovation was born. But instead of the top-down pixel art arcade goers were more than used to, or even the less common side view pixel art, this game was first person. Now, it's a far cry from Far Cry and a long journey away from Journey, but it sure was impressive for the time. Keep in mind, Pong came out only 7 years earlier. It lacked textures as it used the same line drawer that Atari also used for the game Asteroid. But even then, this thing was a beast to run as hardware was slow and 3D rendering technology pioneered by the fellas that would form Pixar was even slower. Well, this impressed many arcade goers and it was quite fun to shoot the lime green outlined wireframe tanks. It was quite slow, anything but easy to develop, and required the power of the sun to run. So it was back to pixels for both Atari and this humble little card company that's first game only came out a few years prior. Named Nintendo, sorta niche, who released Donkey Kong to the arcades, becoming an international hit, allowing Nintendo to make their first home console, the Nintendo Entertainment System, or the NES as I will be calling it from now on, only a few years later.
Hey guy, you're the first serious gamer I've seen all morning. Check this out, brand new 16-bit Super Nintendo with Super Mario World. Wow!
What's this one?
Oh, this is a Sonic the Hedgehog from Sega Genesis. Hey, look at these radical colors, huh?
Wow, Sonic's fast too.
No, over here.
I like Genesis, and it costs a lot less.
Wait, kid, that game
I'll
there.
take Sonic and Genesis.
I knew that.
Sonic the Hedgehog. More action, more speed. Sega Genesis, it's a whole lot more for less.
The NES was a huge leap from Atari's home consoles, having 8-bit graphics that even rivaled some popular arcade titles. And with their now golden child Mario, they were nearly unstoppable until Sega released their Genesis with Sonic the Hedgehog having 16-bit graphics, so twice the pixel density, which allowed for far more expressive characters, and a mega processor which enabled Sonic to blast through the levels with no lag. But while these two now juggernauts were at war, there was a new face working on an innovative title that would change the gaming landscape. ID's innovative Wolfenstein released a year after Sonic the Hedgehog in 1992, where you play as a soldier mowing through Nazi masses during World War II. Because who doesn't love mowing through Nazis? This game, while not technically 3D, provided a very convincing illusion by essentially making a top-down 2D maze and then having the player shoot out a cone, and once it hits a wall, that wall gets drawn the appropriate size based on how far from the cone it is. And the cone is essentially the camera, so once you let the player rotate the cone, they can rotate the camera. Is this an oversimplification of something both too complicated for the scope of this video and for me to understand? Yes. This same approach was used for its more popular successor, Doom, albeit with some innovation, but it wasn't true. It was more of a pseudo 3D, but rather an illusion where you couldn't look up and down. True no wireframe 3D would come in the form of Virtua Racer by Sega. Many claim this to be one of the first fully 3D games, and this being Sega's first foray into true 3D, with them only doing pseudo 3D illusions before, like ID. This game was an arcade cabinet using Sega's custom arcade platform, the Model 1, which would soon be outclassed by its follow-up. I bet you can't guess what it was called, though there was two noticeable problems. 1. You'd have to go into the arcade to play, and 2. The game used flat colors on the faces of polygons instead of textures. But the solutions to both of these problems would come in. Descent, released for the DOS, it was the first ever fully 3D FPS, was on home computers, allowed for 6 degrees of freedom when it came to your camera, and was fully textured. After this, the question was, how could we get this onto consoles? The Doom/Wolfenstein approach had already made its way to home console, with those games having console ports, but this true real 3D hadn't made its way to consoles, so it was on, like, no pun intended, Donkey Kong. The plumber was first, making his jump to 3D in 1996 with his new adventure, Mario 64, and the console was on the Nintendo 64. Shortly after followed the rest of the major 5th generation consoles, including Nintendo's old rival Sega and its new rival Sony's PlayStation and Microsoft's Xbox. With the success of these newcomers, it was clear the days of it simply being Sega versus Nintendo were over. The competition to be the best in games, PCs, consoles, has woven innovation ever since then, causing the rapid improvement and innovation we have seen in the short decades since the 5th console generation. I would argue this vast improvement has had both a positive and negative impact on society, considering that video games have gotten more popular and more immersive, and therefore more easy to escape to, which gives you both experiences that you will cherish for life, and attachments to the characters you interacted with, and a pretty tempting thing to do instead of whatever you were supposed to be doing. 2 languages I believe are relevant to this discussion specifically are OpenGL, because this is typically what's used for graphics programming and is essentially an industry standard due to how performant it is, being faster than Vulkan, which came before it, as well as it not being too difficult to learn at least the basics of. I think C++ is also worth mentioning. It is what many games use partially due to its raw speed. A couple of game engines that come to mind is Unity, with C++ being its primary language, Unreal with it being an additional option if you don't like visual scripting with their blueprints, and Godot offers it as a secondary language to its original language, GDScript, if you are more used to C++ or were being limited by GDScript. Video games have positively affected the economy in driving up purchases, but this also naturally means whenever there is a downturn in video game sales, it affects the economy, even if slight, and especially when huge downturns happen, like the video game crash of 1983.